Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully, you can hear me okay, see me okay. Having a couple of little Zoom issues, but could I get Jane or Kirti to just give me a thumbs up if you can see and hear me okay? Great, thank you so much. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today for the International Education Association of Australia, IEAA 2025 Student Life Network Forum, Employability Unfiltered. At this point, if we were a live audience, I would be saying, can I get a woo? But we might ask you to pop your woo into the chat, and then that lets us also know that the sound and visuals are working well for you as well. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands of Meanjin, where I'm zooming in from, the Turrbal and the Yagara people, and extend my respect to elders past, present, and emerging right across Australia. My name is Susan Schlinker, and I'm one of the co-conveners of the Student Life Network at IEAA, alongside the lovely Charlotte Long and Kaylee Milroy. Now, I recognize that for some of you online, you will have been attending IEAA events for years. And for others of you, this may be your first event today. So if you're feeling like you're the new kid on the block, let me say you're very welcome, and we're delighted for you to be here. And let me briefly introduce you to IEAA as well. IEAA is Australia's leading association for international education, striving to empower professionals, engaging institutions, and enriching Australia's reputation as a provider of world-class education. IEAA also provides advocacy, delivers high-quality professional learning, and drives new research to highlight emerging trends, inform strategy and policy, and enrich the sector's knowledge. IEAA has 8 different networks that bring together like-minded colleagues to exchange ideas and insights, and we are delighted to welcome you to the 2025 Student Life Network Forum today. We have an absolutely stellar lineup of speakers and experts ready to go. But before we move into the presentations, I'm pleased to introduce you to IEAA CEO, the Honourable Phil Honeywood, to officially open the forum. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Susan. And just getting my, sorry. Thanks, Susan. And wonderful to have so many people joining us, and particular thanks to our volunteer committee for all the hard work that you guys do in putting together a fantastic forum for this year. So in terms of, I guess, the election outcome, which is all on everybody's minds, it's probably been the best outcome, as I've said in social media. It's been the best outcome for our sector, I believe, because we're hoping that a majority Labor government return with a very strong, healthy majority might be more inclined to show us the love, so to speak, in their policies and supportive, I guess, funding and the usual expectations we have of government. I think in all of that, though, given that it's a student life forum, we have to acknowledge that the representation of international students in Australia at key government forums is not as good as it could be. In fact, it's really declined markedly. And that's largely because the Council of International Students Australia is now defunct. They didn't survive COVID with the university-based chapters, and their final national president, Yegane, from University of Adelaide, she finished her term as in December last year, and there's been no replacement. Now, there are efforts going on around Australia to have a genuine student representation. IEA has been involved with Asana in looking at trying to build from the ground up through the 6 state and 2 territory study clusters, trying to get them to have representation of international students in their separate parts of Australia, and then build into a national committee. But there's also, in a parallel universe, there's another attempt by a New South Wales-based group to, which is heavily involved with Kappa and Noosa, to also try and establish their own International Student Representation Council. I should point out, though, that Obviously, it's really important that each state and territory has student representation as well, and that some of the study advisory boards I sit on, like Study Perth, Study New South Wales, we used to have an international student representative on those study cluster boards, but in most cases they've fallen by the wayside. And then the national situation, as I say, is now defunct. It's crucial also because we have the Council for International Education, which has 7 federal ministers on it and 11 non-ministerial expert members. And the only ex officio member of the National Council is actually whoever is the national president of the Council of International Students. So again, we have to really work hard there to find somebody to replace Yeganay, who finished up in December last year. So this is an issue that ISANA and IEA are taking an active interest in. It's going to be discussed at our IEA board meeting this Friday in Melbourne. And obviously I'll be talking to whoever the new education minister is about what we can do to beef up really effective representation of international students at the time when the student voice is really needed, really required. In all of that, of course, we've had some interesting policies in the lead up to the election where out of the blue, the coalition announced they're going to allow international students to work 60 hours a fortnight instead of the current 48 hours a fortnight limit. And that came from nowhere. And really, it went right against the whole coalition policy that fewer international students would lead to better education outcomes. How you can have a better education outcome if you're working 30 hours a week in almost a full-time job while studying full-time is beyond me. Clearly, we've got the guides that came out as well on employability, on mental health, and a whole raft of issues that Lee Tran from Deakin University and a number of others put together and that came out last year. I think those guides are really effective tools to ensure that everything associated with student life is understood by practitioners such as yourselves. So I'll leave it at that, other than to say that we now await the announcement by Prime Minister Albanese of the new cabinet. Rumour is that Tanya Plibersek might be the next education minister. We'll wait and see if that comes into practice. And in all of this, rest assured that we're going to be advocating very strongly on behalf of IEAA, but also working with other peak bodies like ASANA to try and get the best deal possible by way of research funding, by way of student advocacy support, which really we desperately need given the terrible policy situations we've been subject to, largely because the coalition used international students as an election issue under a housing statement, and the Labor Party felt they could or needed to respond, if not to match the harshness of some of the Liberal National Party policies, at least to recognise in the electorate that immigration was an issue. Very unfortunately, I think we all agree. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Charlotte, the great convener of Student Life. And thank you also to Carly, and hope you have a great network forum today.
Well, thank you so much, Phil. And thank you for always giving such valuable oversight to the larger picture. And as you mentioned, employability is one of the really important topics when it comes to student life, and especially to international students. And we constantly hear from students, parents, and agents that they want education providers to do more in forging connections between students, employers, and industry, more jobs to be lined up before graduation, and more employability services to prepare students to transition into the workforce post-graduation. And new research from IDP Education has revealed that career development opportunities are now the most important factor for international students when choosing where to study. The Emerging Futures 7 voice of the International Student Survey, conducted in March this year, collected responses from more than 6,000 students across 100 countries. And yet, while education providers are striving to develop these offerings to meet this demand, what we see on the ground is that it's still only roughly 50% of students that are engaging with employability and career services while studying. So, What is the disconnect between international students expressing the need, but then not engaging with the employability services on offer? Is more really the answer, or are there other ways that we can address this disconnect? What we propose to do in this forum today is to dive deeper into this disconnect and turn our attention to explore which cohorts of students are engaging with careers and employability services and which cohorts aren't, to unearth ways that we can collectively better engage with the students who aren't. We're also going to explore whether employability for international students ends at Australian borders and what duty of care we have to international students in supporting their employability needs if and when they return to their home country after graduation. It was a couple of years ago now, but I distinctly remember reading an AAGE report that stated approximately 70% of Australian employers are reticent to hiring international students and graduates. And I'm going to say that again, because yes, you heard the percentage right. 70% of Australian employers are reticent to hiring international students and graduates. That really stuck with me. And I realized that the challenge was not only to improve international student employability, but to influence employers to see the value and understand the processes of engaging with and hiring international talent. So when my role as Senior Talent and Employability Officer at Study Queensland was advertised, I was so excited by the opportunity to work with both international students and employers to improve international student employability, but also to influence the environment of Queensland employers to become more open to engaging with and ultimately hiring international talent. Now, if you've not heard of Study Queensland before, I'd like to do a really quick introduction. We are a specialist team in the Queensland Government in Trade and Investment Queensland, dedicated to international education and training. We provide strategic leadership through the implementation of the Queensland International Education and Training, or IET strategy. We work collaboratively to build a strong and sustainable IET sector, promote Queensland as a premier study destination through our extensive offshore network of business development managers, support international students through grant funding to the 5 study clusters in Cairns, Townsville, Sunshine Coast, Toowoomba and Gold Coast, and offer the 1-800-Q-Study hotline for 24/7 in-language support. Then in addition, the main focus of my role has been to develop an employability program that is complementary to education provider employability programs in Queensland. And what we came up with is the Talent Ed employability program built on 3 pillars: education of employability, engagement, and experience. The education pillar provides self-paced online modules to learn about the priority industries and areas of workforce shortage in Queensland, as well as top tips to enhance employability. And that's referring back to the valuable education provider employability programs that already exist. And then a self-paced module on transitioning effectively into the workforce. The engagement pillar works in collaboration with Migration Queensland, with employers, industry and international talent to provide networking opportunities and for employers to learn more about how to employ talent on international visas. And in these sessions, we tackle the top 5 perceived and real employer concerns of hiring international talent, which we learnt about during a consultation phase with employers in collaboration with the Business Chamber Queensland. And these include concerns about English language proficiency, the lack of understanding of how to employ talent on visas or perceiving that this was just too difficult, the perceived challenge of international talent being a higher flight risk than domestic, the question of, well, why hire international talent when domestic talent is available, and employer uncertainty about how to accommodate staff from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds in the workplace. And then finally, the experience pillar offers real-world experience, currently in the form of innovation challenges, so that students have local experience to discuss in cover letters and interviews, while also making valuable connections to employers and industry. while boosting employability skills such as communication, problem solving, teamwork, and leadership skills. And through the program, we have engaged students from universities, from vocational education, English language colleges, and private registered training organizations from diploma level all the way through to higher degree research. And over 93% of students have indicated that this program has helped their career readiness. And 100% of employers, this is a very cool stat, I think, recommended that other employers engage in the program, but they also indicated that they are now more likely to engage with international students through work integrated learning programs or employment after participating in that program. But yet, we still see, even with great stats like that, we still see approximately a 50% student drop-off from registration to participation. We know that this program and all education provider employability programs are immensely beneficial in skill building, experiential learning, and forging valuable connections. And yet 50% of students still say no to engaging. I know that this is a similar tale from employability and career services right around the country. And I personally cannot wait to hear from the presenters today to learn how we engage the students who aren't participating and move the needle forwards in participation and engagement numbers. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I'd also like to let you know that we have the Q&A function that's available. If you have a question throughout one of the presentations, pop your question into the Q&A function. Our co-convener, Kaylee, will be moderating that, and if there's time to answer it, we will. Otherwise, we'll move to the end. And then also, if you need any technical support, the IEAA Secretariat is also online and you can connect with them in the chat. But moving the needle on international student employability is why we are all here today. And to help us start moving the needle, I am delighted to introduce our keynote speaker and absolute legend, Dr. Alan McAlpine, Deputy Director of Student Life and Community, Student Success at Curtin University, and President of the National Association of Graduate Careers Advisory Services, NAGCAS. Alan leads a team that spans across the student journey from orientation and transition, career development support, and a series of programs that lead to graduate employment. Alan is a long-standing management committee member of NAGCAS and represents NAGCAS on the Career Industry Council of Australia, CICA, executive, and chairs the board of Graduate Careers Australia. Alan has over 20 years experience in the career development field, and we are incredibly grateful to learn from his expertise today. Alan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Susan, for that comprehensive introduction. I think I met Susan at our NAGCAS conference in December last year in Mianjin, Brisbane, and she asked me if I would be interested to talk, and I of course heartily agreed. I think that we talked about. She said you can talk about whatever you want to, and that's kind of the direction that I went in. So what I want to do is, I think, given my history in terms of the careers field, that's obviously where I'm going to focus my attention, and I want to take you through just some background into that, as well as I'm just trying to see if my slides were covered up. Here we go. Into the career development stroke employability space, and then talk about some of the barriers that we see to engagement, the value of higher education and international education in particular, and then how we might bring a couple of things together to try and address some of that. I'm going to be moving into the student panel, which comes directly after me. So I will pause to see whether if there are any questions or comments on what I talk about, and then we'll focus into that. And I'm hoping in the panel discussion, we're going to get a little bit more detail out of some of the solutions and ideas, and maybe really brainstorming around what those look like for our students to engage. I want to start, however, with the UN SDGs, and I think if we look at the UN SDGs, they exist to provide a universal framework to achieve a just, equitable, and sustainable world by 2030. So that's what the UN are looking at. And I think when we look at them, there are two areas that really talk directly to what we're talking about here: the area of decent work and economic growth, and quality education for all. And I want to link that back to thinking about how career development supports these broader societal goals. But also when you start to look at literature, as I've been doing over the past week or so, to look into this topic a bit further, the work of career development and in particular vocational psychology is really rooted into that social justice area. And a lot of what I'll talk about really sort of has that at the back of it. So if we just take the global context first, what's the current situation when we look at the world's economy, and just looking at some data from the World Economic Forum here. Unemployment rate across the globe sits at around, I think it's around 5%. However, the value of a higher education degree is very apparent. So the unemployment rate for people with a higher education qualification sits at 2%. So the value proposition for individuals to come to higher education and to undertake a degree is still strong, and I think that's going to continue. We're also seeing massive change in the way that we work. We had the University Accord come out, it's coming up close to nearly 2 years, I think now, and the need to change and upskill our employees and our society as a whole. And we know that employers in Australia, 70% of them feel the need to upskill their employees before 2030. And 75% of those are planning to do that internally within their organizations. We also know the impact of AI, how that's having on not only the higher education sector, but the economy and the world of work as a whole. So that constant change is only going to be constant. The other interesting fact out of the World Economic Forum is that globally, 83% of employers are focusing on DEI priorities, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the narrative that we're quite often seeing now coming out of the US, I don't think will really take too much of a stronghold. And I think that really talks to us about valuing and prioritizing the education of international students, especially here in Australia. The main recommendations out of the World Economic Forum is that we need to see closer connection and collaboration between university and industry. And of course, Australia has been at the forefront of that for a long while. The work integrated learning agenda is very strong, but clearly there's still a lot for us to do. And that's probably some of the things we should be thinking about as we move forward. The value of international education is still very strong. Australia is still a very strong and destination for our international students. And we are seeing numbers that are higher than they were post-COVID. I recall a conversation as we entered into COVID back in 2021, and our Deputy Vice Chancellor at the time talked about we've seen the high point of international education here in Australia. It's never going to be this good again. And yet in 2024, we had higher numbers of international students coming to Australia than we did previously. So Australia is clearly still selling itself well as a country to encourage our international students to come here. So we definitely have a duty of care and an obligation to ensure that we're doing what we can for those students when they come here for that education, whatever their desires and where they want to end up post that. So I want to shift that thought around desire to come here, some of the stuff that Susan talked about before about the desire and the need for the employment and employability outcomes and connections with industry is a clear driver for students to come here to Australia. I want to quickly focus in on just understanding career development. And just career development and employability and work integrated learning are three different things, but they're highly connected. Career development is that overarching umbrella of how an individual navigates their way across that employment, skill development, and employability landscape. And it really means that we need people to have an understanding of how to help them navigate some of that. And I want to share two theories to help do that. I often used to share the story of when I was doing my PhD. Doing a PhD had often felt, or even other forms of higher education, feels like stepping onto the moving walkway in the airport. And we stand on it and we go in one direction, and we can't get off, and we keep going along in that direction. But every now and then there is a break between one bit and another bit of that moving walkway. And we need to encourage people to stop, look around, and take stock of where they are, who they are, and what they want to do, and not just see that the moving walkway is an end in itself. Is the moving walkway going in the direction you want it to go? And how do we help you ensure that you have the skills, abilities to examine what that looks like? And that's career development, about thinking about what's important for you. So there are two models I want to share that just help sort of ground some of that: the DOTS model and the systems theory framework. The DOTS model was developed way back in the mid to late 70s, and it's still trotted out every now and then. But it's very simple, and for me, is a great way of explaining about what career development is really about. So it's about helping an individual understand who they are, what's important to them, having the ability to look outwards and see what's out there, both in the employment market, what opportunities are available, what do they need to actually then engage with that, whether that be skills, networks, and connections. What do you need to do? And then how do you then make some decisions to take action to actually go ahead and either build those skills or abilities, or put yourself in front of those opportunities to make that the direction you want to go. So often our individuals' choices are not being well considered. They're either being driven from elsewhere, or they're being driven through mythical understanding of what's going on in the world of work. And it's our obligation and we should be doing this work within the career space to help individuals navigate that in a sensible way. So that's a model that came from way of 1977. Then we come to a model that's probably far more used in current career theory speak, which is the systems theory framework, which I know one of our panelists from later on will be very familiar with. McMahon and Patton came up with the systems theory framework. And in some ways, it's talking about exactly the same thing, but actually goes into a little bit more detail. The individual sits at the center of this model, and that individual comes with a wealth of experiences, skills, values, beliefs, what they think about themselves. All of those things are important in helping that individual make that decision. And that then seeps into the external factors that impact and influence those decisions of that individual. So globalization, what's happening in the world, can really then impact on either what the individual's thinking for themselves, or what opportunities are available to them, what access and networks they have through their peers, through their community groups, where they sit within their socioeconomic areas within either the city or the country or the portion of the world that they're in. All of those things are going to impact and influence what happens. And these things will move from the past to the present and the future. And the lightning bolt that's in this model talks about chance events. Things will happen in people's lives that are unexpected, and they'll happen to us all, and they're all going to influence and then impact those decisions. But ultimately, the core of it is about how do we help people navigate all those things and empower them to have control over it rather than someone else. So that's really looking at it very holistically and very broadly. And I never once mentioned employment. So we often have processes that really measure what's going on in that employment space. But career development is a lot broader than that. And the employability component is about, do you have the skills, abilities, wherewithal to get to where you want to go to, regardless of whether you have that employment outcome. However, we do have the situation where we are in our institutions measured through the employment outcomes of our graduates. So let's move to that and actually start to look at, well, where do our international students actually end up? We know that they find employment. However, 3 years post-graduation, the employment figures of our international students are less than our domestic students. That doesn't make any sense. They've gone through the same process, the same educational experience as our domestic students. Why are they not as clearly in employment as our domestic students? They also will end up earning less overall than our domestic students. Again, there's no clear reasoning for that. We know that more international students will end up in further education. So that could be one of two reasons. It could be that they have made a conscious decision that they wanted to go into further study, or it could be that conveyor belt approach, a path of least resistance without any real understanding of what it is that they want to do or where it is that they want to go. And we need to sort of delve deeper into some of this stuff. Let's look at their experience and what's impacting their experience. So the International Student Experience Survey looks at what has a negative impact on your experience within your learning at your university. And these three areas come out as the highest ones. So paid work has an impact, the financial circumstances have an impact on the study experience, and the living arrangements have an impact. Now, all of these also affect our domestic students, but they have a higher impact on our international students. So clearly, the well-being of our students is an issue in relation to how they are then forming and behaving within our institutes. And so how can we start to think about that? So we've got a bit of an understanding of the importance of career development and helping individuals understand who they are. We've got an understanding of the outcomes not being where they are for our domestic students, for our international students. And we have the external impact factors that will make a difference to their experience while they're at university. How do we start to think about all those things together? Let's start to look at what the literature is saying in relation to what's impacting their ability to engage with the support that exists across our universities. So there are three primary areas that tend to come out when you look at the literature around communication and cultural adjustment, the attitudes of our domestic students to our international students, and the way that we frame how we think about our international students. So I just want to delve briefly deep into each of these a little bit further. Clearly a driver to gain intercultural experience, whether a student stays within the country or goes back to their own country, is a strong driver for students to engage. However, the systems and processes that we often set up within our institutions can often be a problem. We clearly have a Eurocentric way of looking at our universities here in Australia, and the majority of the students coming to Australia to study are not from European cultural backgrounds. So that in itself is a way of actually not enabling students to connect. Language is a constant barrier, regardless of the competence level of our students, and is often seen as a strong desire. The aspiration for proficiency in English language and is clearly linked to employment outcomes, but it enhances that dominance of that value of English language, which may or may not be a positive thing in the mindset of our international students. And then we have the whole conscious, unconscious bias thing that happens across the place. So we have clearly a strong need to start thinking about these in a lot more detail. The actions and the attitudes of our domestic students, whether that be consciously or unconsciously, is also a barrier for our international students to engage. Unconscious of exclusions, unconscious exclusions by domestic students. Often our international students are seen as outsiders and need to conform. And we need to start thinking about that in a more reciprocal way. What's the learning that goes both ways, rather than you need to become and work and think and be the way that we are to engage with us within these study environments, and actively displaying that sort of value of Eurocentric culture is also a barrier. I think as Australia goes on, we're going to see that shifting as it becomes far, far more multicultural, but that's still very much the model that seems to be sitting across a lot of our educational institutes here in Australia. And the last one is really looking at how we talk about our international students. It's interesting, and I was reading some of the press releases, the language that people use when we talk about it. We talk about it being a challenge. We talk about the issues with our international students. We see them as a problem to overcome, and we very much approach things as it's a lack rather than what's their potential to contribute back. We see them as something to solve, and how do we really shift that conversation to be about a reciprocal relationship. Even our international students talk about they're seeking fair treatment as opposed to being entitled to fair treatment. They shouldn't have to seek it out. They're entitled to be part of the community that we build up in terms of our learning and our services and our support. That should just be a given for everybody, regardless of whether they're a domestic student or an international student. So there's some things that we need to really start thinking about as to how we really structure our organizations and the way that we approach things. So I want to shift. We talked before about the impact of the negative things that can impact an international student's experience. And I want to start thinking about how do we start to bring together the areas of career development that we've been sort of discussing and the well-being. So we know that post-COVID, our the incidences and the reporting of well-being has gone up, and there's a lot more effort being put into that well-being space. And I'm proposing this as a way of bringing things together. So we know that career development can support well-being, and we know that in particular counselling, career counselling I'm talking about, supports optimism and a positive outlook for individuals. So how do we think about these things together? If we go as far back even as the early 1900s, so Frank Parsons was one of the the early pioneers in the careers world. And he talks about an individual choosing the vocation. So not getting employment, but choosing that vocation. Then they're more likely to better engage with it. They're more likely to sort of feel positive about who they are and contribute back. So it's the old concept of are you working to live or living to work? And it then relates to those underlying motivators for individuals. So often we link together that career development and work thing. When I explained earlier on, they're actually part of the same thing, but they're not the same thing. They're connected. And so it's understandable that these things get interchanged, but we need to be quite clear what we're talking about when we're talking about career development. It's about supporting the individual to have choice and have choice that is informed and in their best interests and is coming from them and not from elsewhere. How do we empower them to take those things forward? So we need to separate that word from job and career and talk about what we want to talk about. We're driven obviously by what's measured, because we know that our institutions will measure, and that's an easy way to measure it. But we need to be thinking a bit more deeper about what we're actually talking about when we're actually connecting into the individual and their well-being and their future experience and engaging with what we're doing here at a university. Even the work that we see out of the positive psychology space, Martin Seligman is one of the key pioneers in that space, and talks about the bringing together of career guidance and impact on improved well-being and encouraging optimism within the individuals and helping people transition from where they are to wherever it is that they want to be. So again, we showed that well-being and is an impact on our international students. So how do we start to bring together the well-being agenda and the career development agenda? I think through the well-being agenda, we're going to start far more likely to see our international students engaging, and we can support them in multiple different ways if we think about it through this way, this lens. So is there a need to therefore bring together our targeted well-being activities and our career activities to help engage our students better in the support that happens at university? The more healthy mentally that a student feel, the more likely they're going to engage. And how do we then meaningfully engage them in what we want to try and achieve? Just trying to check my timing. So moving forwards, I think we know that we can start to bring some of these things together. And we know that things are not going to get any slower. We know that where we are currently, the rate of change is the slowest it's ever going to be. It's only going to get faster from here. If we can support our students through career development activities, help them find direction, help them find purpose, and hopefully find a more fulfilling life, where they're more likely to engage and work through where it is that they want to go and get the outcomes that they're after, both for themselves and their families. So let's try and shift the way that we think about things, rather than talking about the barriers or the issues that we have and the challenges we have with international students, to how do we build bridges and work with them to bring things together and ultimately support them to engage and find that right direction for them going forwards. I'll finish where I started, which is the 8 UN SDGs. And I talked about the important ones in here are about quality education and decent work and economic growth. And those clearly linked to that career development agenda that I'm talking about. But I think there are two others that come out of here. Good health and well-being can also be addressed by some of these actions. And also the no poverty. The more that we can engage people back into the economy, the more we can address poverty across the globe. So a very quick whirlwind through career development, well-being, addressing the challenges of engaging our international students in the work that we do. And hopefully as we shift into our panel, we might get a little bit more insight into some of the other challenges, some of the other things that, we need to work on to help our international students engage. I'm happy to share these slides with the organizing group, and I've put in the references there if people are interested in reading more about some of the things that I've shared with you just now. So I might stop there to see if there are any, I'll go back a sec, if there are any questions or comments that people wanted to make before I move into the panel session. I think I'm on time for the panel session, which is good. I'll pause and see if there's any questions come up. I can't see the question and answer boxes.
No questions at this stage, but I can keep monitoring it if you want.
Cool. Okay. We might move to the panel session then. So I have let's move to the next slide. I have three individuals. I have to say that I don't know an awful lot about them. I haven't met them yet, so this is my first meeting of them as it is with you. So we have Dr. Chintan Advani, who's an engineer within Ipswich City Council. Welcome. Is it Chintan? I'm pronouncing that right?
Yep, that's right. Hi, Alan.
Wonderful.
Nice to
Nice to meet you, Chintan. And we also have Janvi Singh. Janvi, nice to meet you.
Hello, lovely to meet you.
Wonderful. And we have Kirthi Parthipan.
Hello, nice to meet you.
There we are. Have you got your camera on, Kirthi?
I am disabled by the host.
Okay. Can the host switch you on? See if we can. Oh.
Perfect.
Wonderful. So we have no slides for this point, but what I'd like to just welcome each of you and thank you for taking the time to spend the next half an hour or so with us and answering some questions. We have shared some thoughts back and forward between the four of us, and my job is really just going to be helping you talk about your experiences. There'll be the chat box where some other questions might come in, but we have some to get us moving and get the discussion rolling. So I might just start by getting you each to just give a little bit of background of yourself, who you are, where you're from, what institute you've studied or studying at, and what you studied, and then we'll go into some questions. So can I start with you, Chintan?
Yep, sure. Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Chintan and I'm from India. I came in Australia in 2019. I did my PhD in civil engineering from Queensland University of Technology. I graduated 2 years ago and now I'm working as an engineer in Ipswich City Council.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chintan, and welcome. Janvi?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janvi, and I am currently studying at the University of Queensland. I do a Bachelor of Commerce degree majoring in accounting. Along with that, I work at Grant Thornton in the external audit team, and I graduate in July of 2025, so I'm very excited, a few weeks away. I moved to Australia in July 22 to start my degree, and I'm from India originally.
Wonderful. Thank you, Janvi. And last but not least, Kirthi?
I am currently studying my Master's of Data Science at University of Queensland, and it's been almost a year since I've come to Australia. My country of origin is I'm from India.
Wonderful. So we have three folks from the continent of India, not the continent of India, but from Asia, and all based in Brisbane, I see too.
Yep.
I'm guessing that's due to the location of our organizer for today as well.
Yes.
So look, I might start off the questions by just saying, look, what made you choose Australia as a destination to come to study? Who'd like to kick off? I'm not going to put just shove your hand up if you want to start the conversation rolling. What made you choose Australia?
Yeah, that's fine. I can start. So thanks, Alan, for the question. I mean, I did my master's back in India in civil engineering, and I was working on one of the technology which relates to Bluetooth sensors. And I was interested to explore further, and that is why I wanted to do my PhD. And very few of the people might know, but almost at all the intersections in Brisbane, we have those sensors. So we have around 1,200 sensors, and that is the only city in the world that has these many sensors on the network. So obviously, there was no better place for me to go rather than being here.
So it was chosen purely as a result of the technology that existed nowhere else. That was
Yes.
what brought you
Yeah.
to Australia.
Yeah, and the government was already working and was investing in this direction. So I was expecting the research to be more practical oriented rather than theoretical. That was my interest as well.
Cool, thank you.
I've always wanted to live abroad, always wanted to come and study in another country, and Australia was just the perfect destination for me. Having visited the country once before, I made a little trip to UQ, the University of Queensland, and as I walked into the campus, just the sandstone buildings, the open spaces, I fell in love with that campus. And so sort of when university decisions rolled around, that was my natural choice. But I also think from a career perspective, working in accounting, I think the opportunities, particularly in Australia and in Brisbane, were a perfect fit for me. So all those reasons coupled together is what brought me here.
Cool. Did you consider other countries, Janvi?
Not as much. I think I had been to Australia before. I personally really value that work-life balance that, everyone is very appreciative of in Australia. And so naturally I wanted to live somewhere where, I could have the professional Janvi and work and, progress in my career, but at the same time have that time and space to sort of engage in other things that I'm very passionate about. And so being here sort of the last 2 years as well, I've had that chance to not only study and work, but also sort of get involved across the board. And so that really reaffirms what I came for with what I got.
And did you already have family or friends over here?
So very lucky that I do have extended family in Australia and in Brisbane, so that worked out for me. But yeah, no, I moved across all by myself the first few months, and now I have my immediate family with me as well.
Cool, wonderful. Thanks, Janvi. Kirthi?
For me, even though I study data science, I wanted to apply my data science skills in the environment and energy sector. And when it comes to looking into those sectors, UQ and in particular Brisbane is like a land of opportunities for environment sector and energy sector. So that was one of the primary reasons why I considered Australia as my primary destination. However, in addition to that, I am not really a very cold climate person. I'm a very warm weather girly. So that was also one of the other reasons why I considered Australia. And landing in Brisbane also is because of the climate. I mean, in addition to the research and career opportunities, of course.
Well, that's
And
definitely a bonus.
yeah,
So a mixture of the sandstone buildings, the the educational that was here that wasn't going to be got anywhere else, and the wonderful weather. So, Kirti, I'm going to stick with you. Can you talk a little bit about what in your head, in your mind's eye, before you came, what was your expectation of what was going to happen? And I want you to think about it in relation to the support you would have been given and what your experience was going to be like, and then move into what was different from that expectation.
so before I answer this question, I would like to give the audience a bit of more of context to
Sure.
kind of like understand where I'm coming from, why I had those expectations. Because back in India, when I did my bachelor's, I did my bachelor's in computer science and engineering. And in India, you have this concept called campus placements. So essentially, everything that's employability or employability related back in India is very spoon-fed, essentially. So even if it's like employability workshops, how it looks like is you get the notice sent out to each of the departments, and the departments kind of like make you attend these employability workshops. And another thing is companies essentially just come to your universities and then they conduct the initial screening in person. And because that they invest resources in that particular event and stuff, they are kind of like they're inclined to at least recruit one student from that campus. So there's kind of like a benefit cost ratio over there. So all of these aspects I know wasn't the same in internationally. So I know that I needed to be proactive. I knew that there was a difference between being qualified and being employable. And I also knew that I need to have a local network here. However, what I did not know was I expected UQ or just my university in general to kind of be that bridge between myself and the industry. But however, that was not what was there in reality. So when I came here, it was really surprising because they don't act as a bridge, but they give you all the materials, the help, the instruction manual to build that bridge. So you need to kind of like be proactive and go for all these employability workshops, in networking sessions. So you need to do this. So it's not, none of the aspects are spoon-fed to you. None of the aspects are, it is there, but they don't exactly spoon-feed it to you. So yeah, that was something that I observed.
I'm seeing you, Janvi and Chintan, nod your heads there. Would you describe your experience as the same then?
Well, for me, it was fairly different because I was coming directly out of high school. So I wrapped up year 12 in June of 2022. I was here July, had 20 days to pack up my life and move. But I think pretty similar from that understanding of I expected uni to be a lot like school, obviously slightly more flexible. But you study hard, you get good grades, you'll be fine. So I thought, if I put my head down, do well academically, everything else will fall into place. So similarly, around like internships and jobs and opportunities as such. But the reality was obviously pretty different, right? So grades are important, sure. but everything else matters too. So building connections, getting involved, finding mentors, looking for opportunities. And sort of slowly through that, in my first 6 months, I realized that opportunities come when you know the people and the people see that you're clearly passionate about something, not just from a transcript. So panning in your transcript or your resume isn't going to make things happen. It is definitely very self-paced, and you have to be proactive, like Kirti said. You have to go out there, meet the people that you know that will help you and guide you, or be those stepping stones for you to reach where you want to. And I think that was definitely, again, a very big learning in those first few months.
Chintan?
Yeah, I definitely relate to both Kirti and Janvi here because I have passed through those phases. As Kirti mentioned, that for many people from different countries, if they are especially the international student, they might have an assumption that there might be campus placements or something like that. It happens to certain level here as well through job fairs and all. But extensively, you have to do the networking and reach out to different people, like what Janvi mentioned. Just another thing to add here for someone who is in research field and they might have different experience in addition to this is for many of the countries, when you start getting into the research, people assume that you are going to go into the academia. That's where you will land up into. But that's not necessarily the case here in Australia. Again, if you find the right people, if you understand your domain or the space in which you are working, there are ample of opportunities in industry, and they also value your research. And I mean, if I didn't have the skills that I learned in my research, I wouldn't be getting the role that in which I'm currently right now. So that's one good thing here, which I wasn't expecting, but I found it once I came here.
So you've all focused very much into that employment outcome perspective of what you're talking about, just because it's me and what I talked about before. Did you do any work either personally before coming while you were here, or through services within your universities? Do any of that career development thinking work? Was any of that going on? Where was
Yes,
that coming from?
certainly. Yes, certainly. In terms of preparing for coming or for getting a job, I was involved in a lot of activities, academic related activities. For example, I was involved in hackathons, and I was involved into the networking events that provided me with an opportunity to connect with the people who are working in my space. And I think uh, whenever I have a chat with any international student, that is the first thing that I say, that if you want to grow your network, especially if you're coming from outside, these are some of the resources that help you really well to understand what the job market requires from you and for you to connect with different people.
Janvi, Keithy?
I think from my perspective as an international student, I naturally coming into university here felt like I had to work harder to put myself out there. Some of my friends, or like my extended family here, they were all domestic students, and I feel like they already had established networks and a familiarity of how things worked. And on the other side, like international students that I met or ran into sometimes stuck to their own comfort zones, understandably, but I think that made me even more intentional about stepping out of mine when I sort of moved across. And so there's two perspectives, I think, to your question, two parts to your question. The first being obviously from a university perspective, the University of Queensland has a dedicated careers and employability team. So our faculty, the business economics and law faculty, has a careers and employability team, and they're very helpful from the point of view of hosting workshops and fairs and any and every opportunity for you to look at your resume or look at your LinkedIn or enhance your profile. Arrange mentorship opportunities and things as such. So heavily relied on that and leveraged that facility that was provided. But on the same end, there was also sort of my own personal research and background and work that went into sort of establishing myself. And I think whether that was volunteering or student opportunities or being part of student societies, I think that changed the game in a whole different way. And going to heaps of networking events, purely out of like passion and curiosity. I think it was never, I want to do this to get a job or I need an internship. It was, how does the Australian system work? Let me familiarize myself with the way that the industry works, the way that applications work, how people engage, just sort of accustoming myself and learning how Australia works in essence. And I think, yeah, that's those two elements really helped in knowing where I wanted to go and helping me reach there.
Wonderful. Kirti, did you want to add?
Yeah, for me, I think it's a mixture between Janvi's and Chintan's answers as well. A lot of student societies, a lot of employability services from the university engaged with them. And also to add, UQ also has something called the summer research program. So that was also a really good initiative to kind of like bring into a research kind of perspective as well. And the other thing is state government bodies, employability bodies like Study Queensland and other services. And so for me, how I prioritize these events is when some of these events kind of like act as a bridge between the industry and the university, and they also kind of give a tangible sort of takeaway from that day. So for me, an opportunity to engage with the industry as well as show them what I can do was always something that I can always hop onto. And Study Queensland, if I'm not wrong, has completed their innovation challenge. So I participated in that. And so, yeah, a couple of different opportunities like that. And yeah.
Cool. I'm getting a 2 to 5 minute almost wrap up, which is going quicker than I was expecting. Excuse me. We heard, so we've got clearly 3 very proactive students here who've engaged with a lot of support, a lot of services, and a great plug there for Study Queensland. So well done, Kirti. Was that the experience of your peers, and of the ones that you saw not engaging? Do you have any sense of why they didn't engage? Stumped them all for the first time.
I'll take this question then.
Go on, Kirti.
I think for me, there was a different opinion from different peers. One common theme that I see amongst people who don't engage in career services or this workshop is their need for instant gratification. So they want something happen very instantly. They want the outcome happen that day after that event. So if it's like, say, the event comes up with, say, employability workshop event or something like that, peers don't usually engage with that. Or if it's just an networking event or something like that, they don't want to engage because ultimately it doesn't result in a job that day. So I think it's more of a mindset problem. So where people should be educated on the importance of these skills and stuff in the long run. However, the other thing is if these providers or these employability services are also looking into getting more engagement, I would say to add one particular tangible takeaway from that event would be that element would be, kind of like a good hook for other international students as well. So yeah.
Anything to add, Janvi?
I absolutely agree with that sort of tangible element. A lot of students go into events or don't even attend events because they don't feel like they'll get a real gain out of it. Another thing I've noticed in the last last year or so is there's a lot that is on offer. And a lot of the times, things that a few different, say, societies are providing or the university or any forum is providing, there's duplicates. And so students end up sort of looking at which one will get them most value, which one they should go to. A lot of the times they end up missing on key information or missing out on a really valuable connection at an event because they chose to go to another one. Or sometimes when they have too many options, they don't make a decision and end up going to the event. But at the same time, I think sometimes students are just not aware. So they haven't looked into it. They don't know that there are things going on and there are services available, which, I mean, everyone is, as an individual should make that active effort. But at the same time, to sort of encourage students to be able to attend and to be more aware. I know UQ is sort of starting to implement this where it comes up on our sort of dashboard. So when we're on Blackboard, when we're studying, those are resources we have to click on. It pops up there for us to know that there is an event happening or there are these available services. And I think that's been very useful to sort of guide students in that direction. And I'm not sure if other universities are incorporating that, but that'd be something good to look into.
So I want to
Yeah.
just, I'm conscious of time, so I'm looking for a thumbs up that I should be wrapping up within the next 2 to 3 minutes. But I want to sort of get a final comment from each of you. The audience here are going to be people like myself who provide support and services, and we all do it with the greatest of intent and wanting our students to engage. What's your best piece of advice back to the universities that are in the room about how we can better engage those who don't?
Yeah, one thing that that was in experience, my experience and some of the peers that I had who felt was many of the resources or support that university provide, at some level they are generalized. I think the students would benefit if they combine with the university professors or something like that in the respective discipline to provide more target-oriented support to the students. I think that would be valuable according to my point of view.
Wonderful, thanks, Chintan.
There's two things that I'm happy to add. The first being creating more low pressure touch points. So I feel like a lot of times not every student is ready to walk into a room or a networking night and pitch themselves. And especially international students, they may have a language barrier. They may feel uncomfortable pitching and talking to all these people. If there were more informal skill building events, smaller ones where students can sort of build that confidence from ground up, I think that'll be very helpful. And the second one was supporting first-time participation. So again, building on that, someone may not be as comfortable to walk into a room by themselves. They may be international, may not have a friend group yet, may not have friends in the industry that they're looking to go into. So having maybe someone who's a year above them in the same field, same area, where they walk into the event with them. So they're sort of their career buddy or sort of event buddy, whatever you'd like to call it. And they sort of help you make those initial introductions and show you how to have sort of a general one-on-one networking conversation, or teach you those little things that you don't pick up instantly. And so that builds a person's confidence such that the next time they feel comfortable to go by themselves.
Cool.
I think for me,
Final comments, Kathy?
yeah, I think for me, it depends on 3 elements that I've identified. One is to act as a bridge between the industry and the student. Number 2, to have a tangible takeaway on that event. And number 3 is essentially to enable that student to have something interesting to put on in their cover letter. So if you provide more of, say, like case competitions, hackathons with industry partners, because for international students, it's always when it comes to an employability perspective, it's them versus the domestic students. However, by engaging in these kind of events, employability workshops, or say mock assessment center or mock interviews with an actual industry partner, what they can actually kind of turn that application into is make them understand what their skills are, first of all. And number 2 is for them to decide between someone they know and someone they don't, instead of an international student versus the domestic student. So that change in the professional brand is something that I would suggest that you guys look into. So yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Look, thank you, each of you. I think you've provided some really nice, salient and tangible things that our audience can take away. You're not going to hear a round of applause, sadly, but I wanted to, on behalf of everybody that's listening here, thank you, Chintan, Janvi, Kirthi, for spending the time with us and giving us your insights. Hopefully you're hanging around for the rest of the day to listen to the other speakers and panel. Lots of applause there coming through the screen. So look, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. And you've made my job really, really easy as well. So thank you all. I'm now going to hand back to Kaylee. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan, for facilitating that fantastic panel. And thank you so much to all of our speakers so far. I've been madly scribbling down some notes there, especially those key takeaways. So just before we hit a break, where everyone can stretch their legs for a moment, we're just going to grab some information from all of our participants today. So we do have a little bit of interaction. I'm just going to share my screen here so that we can get into our interactive piece. So this will happen twice in the session. So once you've got it up, you're welcome to keep this up. So it's a Menti. Hopefully everyone can see that. So what you want to do is grab your phone or a different device or a browser on the device you're on and type in menti.com. And then it will prompt you for the code 5878943. So you should see that on your screen. Hopefully that's working for everyone. I'll just give you a moment to get in there. And so what you're going to be prompted with is you can put up to 3 responses for this one before you press submit. So the first question we have for everyone, what are the key employability challenges for your that your international students are facing? So we want to hear about your specific examples or challenges that you think international students at your institution are facing. Maybe the student panel has brought some things to light that maybe you hadn't considered, but are challenges. So if you can take a minute and log into menti.com. Perfect, we're on a roll, we're ready to go. So we've got 4 slides before our break, and then we'll come back to the Menti at the end of the session, so you can keep this one logged in. Thank you so much. Fantastic. So for those who aren't familiar with Menti, those words that are coming up larger are more frequent. So confidence, networks, cultural knowledge seems to be the key ones here. So thank you so much for that. We've got about 26 people logged in, so we'll wait a couple more minutes just to pad this one out. Excellent. Thank you so much for those thoughts. That's great. So we've got language skills, choice, which was something that was mentioned in our student panel, resumes, unconscious bias. So not just the students themselves, but probably the employer's unconscious bias, international experience not being recognized. So looking at the resume and no local experience, favoritism or unfavoritism, Australian networks, family expectations and family and norms have come up, work culture in Australia. Thank you so much for all of those. That's fantastic. Okay, we're going to move on to the next one. So stick on the Menti there. So if you can give a quick yes or no here. So does your institution have career services or programs that are specifically aimed at international students? Perfect. So we're looking at about a third of institutions that are responding have specific programs for international students around career services. So when we're thinking about the particular challenges of international students, it's really interesting to see how many institutions do have tailored services for international students in career. Fantastic. We're going to jump to the next one. So again, you can put in a word here. So employability at my institution currently focuses on, so what do you think is the focus? So not to give anything away, but a couple of prompts. So you might talk about work integrated learning, might be networking, might be career readiness, focus on CV creation, applying for jobs, interview skills, whatever you think your institution is really focused on in employability initiatives. And if you don't have international student employability initiatives, just what general employability initiatives is your institution focusing on? Fantastic. Thank you so much for those that are participating. This is really great. So it seems like the key trends here are networking, work integrated learning, career readiness, and building skills, but also graduate outcomes, mentoring, internships. So a really key focus on networking adjacent activities, which is great when we've identified that some of the key challenges are networking. But also one of the key challenges we talked about was confidence. So how are we building confidence? Is it through skills? Is it through engagement, help with applying for jobs? So there's lots of ways that we're building confidence. Fantastic. We've got one more to go, and then we're going to have a quick break. So my institution is best at preparing international students for. So when we're looking at employability initiatives, what do you think your institution is best at preparing international students for? Are you really honing in on their ability to work part-time while they're studying, and how do they find that part-time job to see them through their time as a student? Are you connecting them with employers in Australia specifically for graduate outcomes? Or are you considering that a lot of students are returning home and looking at how to connect students with international initiatives or employability skills that are going to be an international focus? So not surprisingly, most institutions, it looks like, are looking at graduate roles in Australia. So that kind of post-study role, but we do have quite a few that are saying the part-time work while studying is the focus for their institution. Thank you so much, and we'll leave this one up. So if you want to keep adding to it, feel free, and at any time you can jump onto this Menti if you haven't joined us yet. So we'll leave this up as we go to break. So it's 2:20 now. We'll take a quick 10-minute break. We'll start our next panel promptly at 2:30. So I can ask everyone, if you want to go have a sip of water, stretch your legs, please come back just before 2:30 so that we can start promptly at 2:30. Thank you so much. And you can keep the Menti up. We'll use it again shortly. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It's 2:30 by my watch, so we'll get started with our next one. I'd like to welcome Professor Caroline Ruckert, Student Experience and Employability at Griffith University. So she's currently the Dean of Student Experience and Employability at Griffith. And prior to Griffith, Caroline was Director of Student Success at QUT, and the Program Director for First Year Initiatives at UBC in Vancouver, Canada. So Caroline is an experienced senior leader in the field of higher education, specializing in employability, and we're thrilled to have her today. She will also be helping our wonderful panel work through some great questions for all of you to hear some answers to. So take it away, Caroline. Thank you so much for your time today.
Excellent. Well, everyone, it's absolutely fitting that this panel should round us out because, and thank you so much, Alan, and the students for really setting the scene. So as was just mentioned, my role is Dean of Student Experience and Employability at Griffith University, and I think I'm one of three roles across the Australian higher education sector that's a senior leader role that has an integrated employability portfolio. And I just wanted to start there because that really speaks to some of this, I think, significant changes that are happening in our higher education institutions around employability. So I am absolutely delighted today to be able to chair this panel. The title of this panel is employability bound by Australian borders, and who is engaging? And I think that's a really key question. And it's a question that invites us to really think critically about how we define employability. It's one that invites us to think differently about who is employability designed for. And it invites us to think differently about what it means to actually respond meaningfully to the employability needs of our students. And I think it also challenges us in another way. It invites us to think about what needs to shift. And we've heard a lot today about what needs to shift in our framing, what needs to shift in terms of how we actually deliver support to students, and importantly, what needs to shift around how we foster partnerships and a collaborative approach to supporting our international students. Um, Before I introduce the panel, I just want to put a few pieces down because Alan's already done some of that work around the conceptual frameworks and the sector and what's happening at a policy level. There's also been a significant shift, I think, in how universities are thinking about this issue, and just 3 thought pieces to frame the session today. The first thing is, I think we've seen over the last 5 years in particular, employability has gone from being something that was really the focus of 3rd-year students and really the thing that we talked about as students were navigating the end of their degrees, to employability being now a central value proposition of the entire student experience. And it's now for the first time being talked about and integrated into everything from transition in and orientation all the way through to how we support students going into their final year. So it's become a much more front and center priority for universities. I think the second thing that's changed, and hasn't really changed, but we've become more self-aware, is that for our international students, there isn't a single international student, and we talked about that movement away from generic support to much more nuanced support. And that means understanding, some international students are coming to our universities with no work experience. Some are coming because they're already on their 3rd degree. Some are coming with an aspiration for pathway to permanent residency. Some are coming because they have an intent to return home or to go to a 3rd country. And so what's really been disrupted is, one, that there's a linear path around what career development and progression looks like. 2, what the different models are and the complexity that we have a range of different students with different needs, different priorities, and we really need strategies that are a lot more flexible and attentive to those different situated needs. And I think the third thing that's shifted in universities that's actually really significant is employability has moved from being seen largely as the responsibility of a career service or a small group of will practitioners to really becoming part of everybody's responsibility at university. And that's really changed how we mobilize strategy at universities and how we think about the kinds of partnerships. So that's just a little bit to set the scene and to put those 3 pieces down. What are you in store for today? Well, what we've done is we're going to kick off the panel with some prompt questions, and these have been really designed to respond to some of those concepts that I just talked about. And then after about 30 minutes of panel discussion, we want to then open up the discussion and invite you to ask your questions. So what I'm going to ask is, as you're hearing the discussion, if you've got an insight or a question that you want, I'm going to invite you to put it in the Q&A, because we want to come back and really make the Q&A really responsive to what's front of mind for you today. So with that, I am now delighted to introduce an absolutely stellar lineup of speakers. Now, I have to confess that I have given them the challenge of introducing themselves rather than me introducing them, and I've given them the challenge that they have to introduce themselves and frame for us how they connect into the employability context. And I've given them the challenge that they have to do this in 1 minute. So let's see, it's a little bit of competition. Let's see how they track. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic, as they say, over to Shelley Lewis. And Shelley is our Director of International Engagement from TAFE Queensland. So Shelley, over to you to situate and introduce yourself.
Thanks so much. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I'm the Director of International Engagement at TAFE Queensland, and also I'm the Treasurer of the Study Cairns Executive Committee. So at TAFE Queensland, my teams are responsible for onshore student recruitment, international student welfare and engagement, marketing and offshore training development. So I'm kept quite busy. And last year we had approximately 4,500 international students studying with TAFE Queensland across ELICOS and higher education programs from 92 different countries. So when we're looking at offshore employability, the span is significant when you're talking about that many markets and countries that we're working with. As one of the leading vocational education institutes in Australia, we have really incredible employment outcomes in the short term. Just under 90% of our students are either working or in further study within 6 months of graduating. And that's a kind of similar statistics either for the international and domestic students, although we absolutely do acknowledge that the challenges of even tracking our international students and employment outcomes is much more significant than for our domestic cohorts. But because of the nature of what we do in the training sector, it is a bit different than the university, because we're not just in the kind of the education business, we're also in the business of equipping people for work and making sure that those skills for employment are absolutely built into every single program that we have. There's a really interesting challenge, I guess, that we have between balancing the genuine student requirement, which comes from the kind of Department of Home Affairs, where for vocational kind of programs, they're often quite short. Our students don't have the opportunity necessarily for post-study work rights, but also balancing that with the needs of many other government departments who recognise that we have significant skill shortages, which our international students can fill. So that's a really in my 1 minute, that's a quick summary of some of the challenges and a snapshot. And I'm really excited to hear from the other panelists today about their perspectives.
Thank you very much, Shelley. Next, I'm going to pass the baton over to Payman and invite Payman for you to situate yourself.
Hi, everyone. So honored to be here. Thank you so much, Caroline. And so I'm a sort of a lecturer, kind of career practitioner by tool for the past about 15 years. So I began my journey as an international student for a very long time. So I've been an international student in Australia, as well as 2 other countries before coming to Australia. So I've been, shopping around as an international student myself, and then finding my way into the career development field here in Australia as a PhD student, and then gradually situating myself in the academia and, establishing a sort of research career as well as teaching. My teaching over the past 6-7 years at Griffith University has focused more on career counseling and career psychology, career development. A lot of my research relates to focusing on supporting the career development of migrants, refugees. That also overlaps with a lot of international students. Yeah, so I think that's as far as I want to introduce myself here. Thank you so much, Caroline.
Yeah, thank you very much, Payman. And I'm delighted now to pass the baton to Elaine. I invite you to introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Elaine, and I look after alumni engagement here at the University of Sydney. With over 470,000 alumni across 170 countries, our community is truly global. We're currently in graduation season mode at the moment, so by the end of the month, we will have more alumni to add to that. So the career journeys that our alumni take is also quite diverse and global as well. So in the alumni team, our role is to ensure that support just doesn't end at graduations, that alumni know, or graduates know, that our doors are always open. We partner with the Career Centre, with recruitment teams, different teams in country, to create networking opportunities across different time zones and life stages. We're always thinking about how we can help alumni stay connected to each other and also to the universities, wherever their career paths take them.
Thank you so much, Elaine. I'm now going to pass the baton over to Ross.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Hi, everyone. My name's Ross. I work at LinkedIn. I've been here for about 11 years. And at LinkedIn, our mission is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And in plain English, that basically means we help people get jobs and learn skills, much of the similar vision of a university. And so in the sense of the Australian context, we partner with every university around Australia to do really 2 things. One is understand the labour market, what's happening when it comes to jobs, skills, education outcomes, and partnership opportunities. And then the other is more student facing around careers. So providing insights to students around career pathways, resources to help them find jobs, and ultimately connect them with a network that is really uniquely available on LinkedIn. So that's a little bit about me, and really excited to discuss such an important topic about employability, partnerships, international students today, and some of the data that we have.
Thank you so much, Ross. And last but not least, Tony, can I invite you to introduce and situate yourself, please?
Thank you, Caroline. Hi, everyone. I'm Tony, International Career Lead at IEAA. My role focuses on building the global employability pathways for international students by engaging industry partners both within Australia and across Asia. With a background in the international partnerships and the career development, I particularly passionate about the ensure that career services and culturally inclusive, accessibility, and also align with the students diverse post-study aspirations. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone, for introducing. I think we did pretty well with the 1 minute. And as you can see, what we've got today is a broad panel that's bringing together representatives from universities, from the vet and TAFE sector, from industry, with a range of different industry-focused roles. And that's quite deliberate because we really need to look at this conversation in that more holistic way. So one context is often when we hear really complex curly challenges, what inevitably universities like to do is they say, well, we're going to solve the problem through data. And we're going to have I don't know, all of us have probably heard at some point, a data-informed approach. What is your data saying? So I thought we might kick off looking at data and looking at the question of data. So how might we take a more data-informed approach to supporting international student engagement with their career development? Because a lot of our universities are resource constrained right now. There's a lot of demand, and we've also got an increasingly complex student cohort. So I might pass it to Ross just to kick us off. How can data help us with this complex challenge?
Sure, yeah, happy to take this. And I suppose to give everyone a little bit of context, if you're not as familiar with LinkedIn, we've got 1.1 billion people using our platform around the world, 65 million weekly job seekers, tens of millions of jobs at any given time, and almost every university in the world represented on our platform. So we have a ton of information, and what that really can boil down to is actionable insights for universities to consider. And there's kind of a couple of different ways that we work with universities on this and ways that this can be applied. One is really figuring out things that you don't know today. So where do our graduates go? What are the skills that we may be teaching that might be not relevant? Or what's the industry looking for that we're not currently incorporating? What are the countries where our graduates go to when they finish, if it's not Australia? What are the industries that maybe we haven't looked at that we could be partnering closely with, particularly in the long tail? You know, a lot of the times universities will pick the largest 10 businesses in Brisbane that we all know, but maybe not think about the 50 other smaller businesses that may be employing 2 or 3 graduates. So that's just a little bit, I suppose, on understanding the market. The other is more on hypothesis testing. So, for example, we are going to launch a new course on software engineering. We think that the top 10 skills should be this. Let's see, is that what's resonating here, as well as what are the top job titles? How are they changing with AI? Should we be really thinking about the career outcomes before we start teaching in courses across, let's say, business, which we've seen are one of the most common job titles that people have when they leave Australia, which is quite an interesting kind of insight around the most common degrees that are actually leaving. I will caveat that LinkedIn doesn't know anyone's visa status, so our data and insights can really only be informed by talent flows across countries. But to give you just one more insight before I kind of wrap up is we do have about 4.5 million LinkedIn members list an education experience at an Australian university. 1.1 million of those are not in Australia today. So basically 1 in 4 people that currently have a LinkedIn profile that studied at an Australian university are working somewhere else in the world. So that really leads to the global mindset of employability, I think, that is unique today, that these may be Australians, they may be international students, but we're truly in a globalized workforce where people are going to countries all over the world to work. The top ones being Singapore, USA, China, UK, and Malaysia as the top destinations for people that have a degree from a university in Australia. So tons of opportunity. I suppose it boils down to key objectives around employability, industry partnerships, work integrated learning.
No, thanks, Ross. And I think that really sets the scene, and hardly surprising given that LinkedIn would have a copious amount of data. I'm interested for the panelists who come from institutions. I'm really interested in how are you taking a data-informed approach in the work that you're doing at your universities to support your international students, and what is helping you translate data insights into action, and what challenges are you facing in that space? So I might open it up more broadly to the panel. Yeah, Shelley.
Look, initially, when it comes to student attraction and recruitment, we rely on a lot of data from Trade Investment Queensland and Austrade, who we work very closely with, to provide information around what are the jobs shortages and scarcities offshore in different markets that we work with. So we plan our recruitment strategies and plans very much around those offshore job skills areas and shortages, as opposed to the Australian skill shortages. And that's one way that we're using that data to try and align more closely with the graduates, so that if they're in a situation where they either need to or would like to return home, we know that they've got the skills to find employment back in their home countries.
Any of the other panelists want to add, just in terms of how you're using data, maybe just around more the student experience once they're in country and at our universities? That's all right. We can move on. I think one of the things when we look at the sector is there's been a lot of really interesting data insights also being informed by the work done in the UK, where a lot of universities now are asking students employability related data as they enroll. And again, that's starting to unlock some different ways of mobilizing strategy. So we've started with data. The other piece that we've talked about, and it's a theme that's come up in Alan's presentation, but also from the students, which is really rethinking how we do industry partnerships. And we have that old conundrum that our employers are asking for work-ready graduates, and yet we know also that our international students are often underrepresented in different kinds of work-related experiences. So this question really wants to hone in on that. So how might we take a more partnership-driven approach to the co-design of more inclusive career development experiences with industry? And I know this is something that the panelists will all be able to speak to, but I'm going to invite Tony to kick us off with that question.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. This is a really good question, and I'm really looking forward to give the answers. At Uni Adelaide, that we have been very international about shifting from one-way employee engagement to the true co-design. We have found that international students that very often look out just of the lack of the talent, but because of the engagements, model has been built with a team in mind. That's why we now work closely with the employers, especially across Asia, to develop a culturally relevant programs that reflects the real hiring context for international students. For example, we have partnered with organizations like ByteDance and Locking China to co-create, sessions that, being with the two languages, alumni, and focus on practical recruitment insight for students on practical recruitment insights. For international students planning to return home, we also provide employers that toolkits that demonstrate the visa pathway and showcase that value international students bring to their workforce. And on the accessibility side, many international students don't feel that the career activities simply because they don't see themselves reflected. So we have introduced low barrier entry points such as informal industry expressions chat, hybrid session, and also storytelling based on events featuring and alumni from diverse backgrounds. Those efforts makes career development feel more approachable, which still industry connected. Thank you, Caroline.
Excellent. So can I just pick up the thread? And Shelley, I might pass this over to you because we've talked about that there's different models for collaboration. One of the questions I would have is, what is it that motivates industry? What will bring industry to the table in a meaningful way for us to partner? Because if they're not at the table, partnership becomes very tricky. So Shelley, what have you learned just within the context of the work you do at TAFE?
Look, this is one of my favorite questions, because again, everything that we do aims to engage with industry from the very beginning. We've got connections with around 20,000 employers who we interact with on an almost daily basis across various different parts of our institution. The one thing that's quite disappointing for us is that international students don't have accessibility for apprenticeships and traineeships, which is the best way to integrate with employability outcomes and employers. So what we do is we make sure that we embed work placement into almost all programs that we have for our international students where they don't have the opportunity to have those direct employment relationships. So part of what we do is leverage our existing very strong connections with industry. And that's not just the big employers like the Hilton Hotels and the Toyotas, but also those mum and dad employers. So you've got, a hairdressing independent employer who might have just 2 or 3 workers. And we provide an opportunity for the international student to actually experience what it's like working in one of these employment situations. That also gives an employer an opportunity to understand what it's like to have an international student or an international worker. And more often than not, that leads to a direct employment outcome after graduation. That's one element that we're really strong in terms of really kind of wanting to make sure that we embed that vocational placement element and make that connection. The other bit is connecting with Trade Investment Queensland, Migration at Queensland, and the Skilled Workforce Attraction Office. So we're currently running a series of events over the next couple of months where we're inviting industry and our international students to meet to talk about those skill shortage areas. So just, again, those networking events and opportunities for that direct contact between our international students and industry, where they can have conversations and ask employers questions directly. We spoke about the hesitation and the reticence of students to go to a careers office and talk with someone they don't know about, how do I get a job? So it's really about embedding those opportunities for them to kind of have incidental conversations in an environment they feel really comfortable with. And the study clusters as well are doing a fantastic job. Experience Gold Coast is having, I think they're trying to break a Guinness World Record next week with the world's biggest networking event for international students and employers, which is fantastic work. And Study Cairns as well is about to host an employability summit as well in June. So we're really trying to engage through those other kind of larger networks.
Yeah, excellent. And I just want to invite for the panelists, anything that we want to add just around the industry engagement models, any other threads that you've been exploring in your institutions that we might want to put on the table here? Yep, Payman.
Can I just quickly add something to this conversation, which is about, I think for as much as I see engagement of the industry in terms of supporting the employability career development of international students, there's a lot of focus on bridging after curriculum has already occurred in particular disciplines. And what I don't see that much, and I'm not the best person and expert on this, but I don't see this happening a lot, especially at the university level where, I'm more sort of situated at, which is that in designing curriculum, in designing courses and programs, the employers should also have a say, because I think the biggest gap that we see is that employers say that, graduates, and not only international students, but also domestic students, are not prepared for a lot of the jobs. So there's this big gap that already exists. It's been always there, and I think it's now perhaps even wider than before, that employers complain that the students are not really ready for our sector. And I guess at the core of that should be a more sort of focused engagement of the industry in designing curriculum, or at least particular courses. Yeah.
So I think we've come full circle where I think, Shelley, your point that, what are the external partnerships, and not just with industry, but with other entities that are supporting employability. We've talked about different conceptual models around design. And I think, Payman, your point around the important role that industry can play around curriculum design and development. Again, there isn't going to be a single solution. Pim, I want to pick up now that thread around, so we've talked about the industry engagement side. I want to now pick up the thread that if we think about, I just went on a recruitment trip to India and just came back. And what was really interesting is within the conversations that we were having with agents, the absolute priority that career development is framed within the context of a lifelong conversation for prospective students even before they choose, and also the expectation that career development support needs to be something that is also occurring post graduation from the university. So I want to now pick that thread up and ask, and I'm going to ask this to Elaine and Payman, because I know this is an area that you both have thinking deeply about, but how can we reframe career development and employability as a lifelong journey that extends beyond graduation? And what might that mean in terms of how we do the work currently, and how might we want to change how we do the work moving forward? So I might invite Elaine maybe to kick us off, and then pass to Payman for that one.
So this year, there's been a really big push for the alumni team to work more closely with our career centre, which is there's increasing investment in it, and they're increasing their offerings. So they're now delivering over 30 workshops. Some are targeted to students here, and some are targeted to those internationally. And these are kind of geared towards advice and tips on how some find work. So we have some workshops that are uni-wide, and then some that are industry and faculty specific. So that's new here. And so, I mean, we're trying to meet the needs of unique disciplines across borders. And part of my role is to reach out to alumni that have travelled that path 3 to 5 years out, to bring them back to speak with alumni and to give them some advice and tips on how they've got work after graduation. All of these sessions are recorded as well. So, I get students are in different time zones, and so yeah, by having a bank of these resources, it kind of helps alumni worldwide. We started this, we called it the Alumni Festival last year, but it's actually turned into Grad Fest. So it's a flagship event targeting our young alumni. So those that graduated 3 to 5 years out. We do a lot of events kind of for alumni that are mid-career, and some of our older alumni groups, in reunions, and bring them back to speak on panels or give the occasional address at graduations. But we identified that there was a gap for our young alum. So our Grad Fest it's a series of events and webinars that supports the transition from our students to alumni. So around 50% of the graduating cohort are international students. So the programme has a very strong career and employability focus, with sessions on beginning your career and finding work within the international community. And then we have a networking night featuring cross-disciplinary industry panel of alumni and affiliates as well. One of the things I'm noticing, and I don't know if this is because of COVID, but I noticed some of our young alum are hesitant. They're very shy when it comes to networking. Like they come to networking events, and some bring their mum, some bring their family members or their sisters, because they don't want to come on their own. So I think maybe we need to do a little bit more work around giving them the confidence to network and go to these events. And I know it takes a lot to put yourself out there and go when you don't know anybody else in the room. It can be a little bit daunting. But yeah, so we've kind of started to do some of these kind of icebreaker activities to try and make them feel more comfy, or allow them to bring a friend or bring someone, even if they didn't study with us, just to encourage them to come.
That theme, thank you, Elaine. That theme around career confidence is definitely something that we've heard throughout the conversations today. And that's the other spectrum of lifelong, which is how do we support this in the transition in space. So Payman, I'd be keen to hear your thoughts just around that promotion of a lifelong, more borderless approach to career development.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to emphasize two things. So first of all, I want to extend that sort of conception of lifelong by also emphasizing its life-wide sort of nature. And what I mean by that, I have to go back to Alan's presentation earlier today, where he mentioned the systems theory framework, and which sort of frames career development in a more holistic perspective. There's family, there's the globalization, there's peers, teachers, everyone involved in that sort of picture. Now, having that in mind, I remember one of Alan's slides was pointing to a couple of themes on the career and career development, which is around, career sort of being about people having a direction, but also at the end having fulfillment, bringing fulfillment to people. Now, I want to pause on that word fulfillment and say that here is things become a bit murky, because fulfillment is more of a sort of a value-oriented individual notion. What is fulfillment for me differs from your fulfillment. You know, how do we define fulfillment on the sort of work that we do, following the sort of work that we do matters a lot. On that, I want to make another point that says, you know, this notion of fulfillment is culture bound, as our understandings of careers and career development is also culture bound. Now, having that up to this point, I've written a sentence here as a result of listening to a lot of the conversations that happened today. And this might be a little bit bold, but I'm thinking that for as long as we want to respect and maintain cultural diversity in Australia, we'll continue to face such problems as the one about the employability and engagement of international students. So this is quite bold, I think, you know. And so I'm trying to illustrate how by sort of ticking the box for cultural diversity, respecting and acknowledging various perspectives, we are going to sort of a struggle here, going back to some of the sort of data that I was seeing earlier today, about 70% of employers hesitant to recruit international students, or 50% of international students not engaging in employability sort of practices and programs and that sort of stuff. So I think at the core of that is that diverse views on what is career development, why do I need to engage from the side of the student. So pointing again to a couple of different perspectives, perhaps, that some of our domestic students differ compared to perhaps a lot of our international students. For example, on notions such as individualism and collectivism. This might be a pretty sort of simple categorization, but I think it's pretty strong in terms of realizing that, you know, following the Protestant movement, following what sort of changed the Western culture in terms of work, why should I work? What is the underlying reason that I work? There's a lot of that individualism that we take for granted. And then when we face international students who are, a lot of them, not feeling into that sort of a space, a lot of them are still looking at work from that collectivist framework. And I want to perhaps also put two words here. I know it's pretty much philosophic, but I think transcendent and immanent views on work. So there's this transcendent view. Why should I work? I have to work because of my spirituality, because, you know, it's good, because it's, you know, recommended in my faith and so on. And then there is the other view. Why should I work? Well, because I want to express myself, because I want to, you know, let other people know who I am and what I can do. Like I want to prove myself, or I want to have, you know, good financial outcomes and so on. So these are all immanent perspectives. So I think we are swimming in this ocean between, you know, transcendent views on careers and career development, or generally work, and immanent views, as well as individualism, collectivism, all of those sort of cultural diversity issues that we need to tackle. And to wrap this up, what I think needs to happen, because I think, again, Alan made a point about how as Australia becomes more multicultural in future, perhaps this gap narrows. Yes, I agree, but I also think that this gap narrows not by itself, but by the efforts that we are all sort of putting into this picture. And these efforts are basically all towards gearing dialogue, making dialogue happen. And what I mean by dialogue happen is dialogue between individualism, collectivism, dialogue between transcendent views on work and immanent views on work. So both parties, the international students, the migrants, as well as the host country people, need to express their views on work and exchange ideas about which one of these views perhaps serve people in society better. And I think as a result of that, we'll see that gap narrowing over the future. Yeah.
Thank you, Perrin. And it's interesting, you know, when we look at that, the lifelong, you've added the life wide, and you know, not just thinking about what are we offering in the prospective student space or graduation, but really, I think you're inviting us to say, well, what's the cultural situatedness of those strategies, and how do we unpack that in a more critical way, especially in the context of that we might be having strategies that are serving multiple different cohorts of students. So I think that's a really important addition to the conversation. before we hand it over to the broader group, I want to surface one other piece, which is going back, and Alan and I used to actually work at QUT, and when we did, I remember at the time, you know, if you were to say employability at the university we worked at, everybody would have said the careers team, or they would have said will. And now when you ask that question, they will still say will and the careers team. But what we're noticing at universities is there's a real shift in who's responsible, and we're moving now towards much more of what I would call it's everybody's business and shared responsibility. So this is my final question for the panel before we open it up. So what does this growing shift towards shared responsibility for employability mean for the participants on the call today? Because we have largely international educators from various roles. How does that concept of shared responsibility shift how we need to do the work and how we think about the work? So I might pass it to Shelley and then to Elaine and then Payman for you to close us off.
Sure. And look, acknowledging that the TAFE system is quite different to universities. So for us, our educators are the biggest influencing factor in employability for our students. So each of our educators has a mandatory 2 weeks of industry placement as a minimum every single year, where they down tools, stop teaching and go back into industry to make sure that they're maintaining their currency in market, that they're connecting. So really, when we're talking about our industry connections and those employability conversations, I'd say 95% of the time, students have conversations with their trainer, and the trainers will provide a contact or an opportunity for the student, which is a great way to have that personal connection. Our careers teams really are about supporting with resume writing and interview tips and skills and things like that as well. The other piece that I really think is worth just touching on briefly is the offshore advocacy piece and the Team Australia approach to making sure that all of our qualifications, be it certificates, diplomas or degrees, are recognised as world-class qualifications. So when we're looking at offshore ongoing employment opportunities, why will an employer see an Australian qualification as being an advantage over a local qualification or a qualification from Canada or another country? So that's another piece that, you know, we're actively looking at when we're doing our offshore kind of advocacy and business development trips. But we absolutely could have a more coordinated approach as a sector to strengthening that reputation even further.
Excellent. You're thinking about partnerships now much more holistically across and outside the institution. Elaine, obviously the context of a university is quite unique in its own right. What would you add to the conversation?
So what we're doing now is we're encouraging academics when they're traveling, or any senior staff of the university, to connect with alumni in those particular cities or countries that they're traveling to. Our Vice Chancellor is currently in the US attending meetings, and we've actually organised 5 different alumni events. One in New York, Boston, Washington, San Fran, when he's there to connect with alumni on the ground, get a sense of what they're feeling. We also are encouraging students when they return to their home countries, and we're supporting them to connect there. And how we're doing this is we used to have like alumni networks, and we still do have in some of the bigger cities that have like committees and things like that. However, it's really hard for those that are in cities, like not the big cities, you know, to connect, and some want to connect with those and that, you know, they may have studied with or had friendship groups or whatever. So we've started this thing called a global connect. So it's an integration between local and global. So we're trying to bring alumni together globally. So when we hear of an academic or any staff that's traveling, I recently returned to Dublin, and I organised an alumni gathering while I was there. So I had 27 alumni. Some were connected to the university, and some were, as Ross tapped on there earlier, we thought that they were in Dublin or Sydney, but they actually were in the UK, or they were in Barcelona, and they decided, you know, we didn't have their details, we didn't know where they were. But for us, it's a really good way to find our alumni by encouraging them to connect. So we have an academic travel into Helsinki later in the month for a conference, and we've lined up alumni that we think are traveling to this conference to connect with him. And also, again, we've identified we have about 20 alumni there, but until we have an event or put out invites, we don't know. So yeah, it's a really good way for us to encourage alumni within different areas and cities to connect and stay connected. Yeah.
And it's interesting, Elaine, that you talk about that, because we often talk about the movement for industry around reciprocity and mutual benefit. What you're talking about is also the role of reciprocity for our alumni, both what do we do to support them, but also how do they then give back to our institutions, and how do we facilitate that culture of reciprocity. Sounds like you're doing it very well by design at UCID, which is great. Payman, I know this is a topic you're passionate about, but what would be your thoughts before we invite some questions from our audience?
Sure. A couple of things I have in mind. I'll just share them perhaps randomly at this point. But one thing I want to emphasize is that my work predominantly focuses on this intersection that career development has for a lot of migrants, including international students, with their migration. I think we sort of lose sight of the fact that there is this other discipline, domain, field, whatever it is, that's called migration studies. There is a huge amount of knowledge and resources available in that sort of field, experts in that field who are able to provide insights into the sort of complexities that surround migrants, international students. Why I'm emphasizing this is that every time, as an international student myself, I think about this notion of supporting employability of international students, I am reminded that at every point that I wanted to migrate as an international student, move into a new country, when I apply for visa, there is this message that's being implicitly communicated to me that you have to make it clear that you're not staying in that country. So right at that point, the international student detaches psychologically from this idea of me having to establish and situate myself in that country. So this is a sort of a dual message. Now, what I'm trying to say is that I think we need to connect with migration, with, I don't know, the Department of Immigration in Australia, with other stakeholders and policy, and make it, find a way to tackle this loss that we have at pre-migration stage of monitoring, perhaps, or gathering data, perhaps, about who intends to become an Australian permanent resident, who intends to stay, who intends to become an Australian citizen. And I think by having that sort of knowledge, or at least we can start implementing certain strategy, even at the pre-migration stage, about the employability, how this student is perhaps going to sort of have a career trajectory here in Australia while they're studying, if they intend to become permanent residents and citizens. If the Australian government actually intends to fill the skill shortage by using this potential that exists among the international students, and realizing that the international students are the best migrants that they can really invest into, rather than bringing someone who is not familiar with the Australian sort of workplace yet. There's at least some familiarity for the international student. That's one. And the other one I just want to point quickly is, again, realizing career development as something that's life-wide. And I think the notion related to the previous point I mentioned about collectivism, I think, is recognition of the role of family for our international students. And family, I mean, it could be parents, it could be partners, it could be even children. But I guess in terms of the broader group that we could engage or somehow think of as strategies is realizing that parents and partners have a say, or have an influence at least, in how an international student navigates their career. And I guess these are the people that we usually do not engage. We focus on the individual, not realizing that this individual, again, coming back from those different understandings and conceptions of the term career and career development, is bound to those sort of other systems such as family and peers or partners. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point around the cultural shift, not just within our institutions and who's coming into the conversation in new ways, but your point around how do we shift the broader discourse and who could be potential partners, and you've really honed in on family and also how do we think of this within a broader context of migration and immigration across Australia. So what I want to do now is just pause, because we've got a really diverse group of audience members in the room, and I want to invite now an opportunity for audience members to ask the panel any questions. And I just want to give pause there. Charlotte, do we have any questions or anything come up?
We don't have any formal questions on the Q&A, but I have a behind the scenes question. Charlotte, are you okay if I do this one? Thinking about lifelong learning and employability and education, what do you think is the role of recognition of prior learning, and how can we overcome some of the challenges that diverse recognition of prior learning experiences pose?
Who wants to tackle that one? All right, we've got Shelley and Ross. I was wondering if you wanted to have a tackle of that as well.
And look, I'm not an expert in the recognition of prior learning area, but I can say that it is a challenge in terms of ensuring that there's the right kind of funding mechanism for those wishing to migrate to be able to access recognition of prior learning. There can be significant gaps, particularly if you're looking at the vocational education environment, the trades and those high skill gaps areas. If we look at construction, for example, you would think it should be open and shut, but there's recognition of prior learning from the kind of curriculum mapping side of things, but that skills gap and that training piece that actually costs a little bit of upfront money and investment. There is, as I said, there are some funding mechanisms in place to support that, but really when we're looking at skill shortage areas in Australia, we really need to bridge that gap much more strongly.
And Ross, I just wanted to invite, you might have a slightly different perspective on this.
No, look, and I think if I was to think about LinkedIn's role, we're not really in the area of recognizing prior learning. That's probably more for the federal government in education to consider. However, I think the area that I can share a bit of a perspective on is when we take ourselves out of those highly regulated areas that Shelley's mentioned, like trades, healthcare, engineering, where you really want to make sure that someone does have the skills that they need. When you go into more soft skill based roles that are more in the professional era, that can be a little bit different around, you know, what is a project manager? What is a salesperson? What are the skills that you need to do that role? Do you need to have a degree to do that? And I think these are the sorts of areas that can really pose the question of what is the exact outcome that someone may be expecting? Is it a job title? Is it a collection of skills that they can use in a diverse way? I think that's what LinkedIn really leads on in the way that we view careers. We've got so much data about different career paths. We've been trying to build career tools to say, here's a pathway that everyone will go. You know, you go from a lecturer to senior lecturer to professor. That's not really how the world works. People pick up lots of little skills throughout different life experiences that lead them to a specific, tailored, unique career experience. And so I suppose that's where we kind of look at, back to your point a little bit earlier, Payman, around the full spectrum of how you're building curriculums. If it is from a skills based, what are the key things that Australia doesn't have, or what is the outcome that we're hoping for this student to get? Creating modules that are tied to skills that are relevant for lots of different careers, not just one specific career. I think that's where we kind of have worked with a lot of universities. I know UNSW is one, as well as Victoria University, to really create that end-to-end spectrum of, you know, an informed curriculum plan with skills first as kind of the leading mindset about how we build the course, and then ultimately then career outcomes through industry partnerships and work integrated learning. And that's I suppose one unique thing that maybe we are in a position to inform the non-regulated careers that people end up going into after doing a university degree.
So Ross, we've actually got a question for you that's come from the audience. And so the audience is, the question is from Molly. So I've noticed a trend amongst our students with creating their personal brand on LinkedIn. And so they're asking you, Ross, is there a mechanic on LinkedIn you recommend that can be used as a good incentive for career-driven students?
A mechanic in what sense? I'm not exactly sure. Kind of a best practice for career students to get the most out of LinkedIn. I think the most important thing is to build an authentic profile and really share your true experience of actual projects that you've done. So that might be links to online resources, examples of work, references from people that you've worked with if you've been fortunate to have gotten a work integrated learning opportunity, sending personalized outreach, trying to go to real life networking events, such as the ones that Elaine's mentioned that she's organizing for alumni. I think these are the sorts of real world examples of how students leverage the platform. And the one thing that we've seen is video is exploding on LinkedIn. People are massively adopting this. You're probably seeing all this in your newsfeed. The students that really stand out and have hundreds of job offers are the ones that are, documenting through kind of video blog style their student and work experience and learnings for people to really get value from. I think that's where you know, the students that are really shining are really leaning into the video-based angle on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Ross. So we started the journey by talking about the fact that if we look at the graduate outcomes for international students, there is a significant gap, and this panel was focused on how do we really support all international students to be engaging better. So I want to, and we've done a route around data, industry partners, career development learning, new ways of working. I want to end now by inviting each of you. If we go back to that problem that we put on the table, which is we have an increasing number of international students coming to our shores, but they're not always getting the outcomes hopefully they would expect or aspire to. What is one key insight, takeaway, or actions? I'm going to ask each panel member to reflect. What is one thing that we could do to really shift the dial? And if you had to pick one thing, what would it be and why? And I might invite Tony, I might invite you to kick us off. So what's your one key takeaway, insight, or action that you'd like to see us focusing on as a sector?
Thank you, Caroline. I think if I choose one thing, it would be this: we need to just stop treating the employability as service students. I think that it's just like a core part of the international students' experience from day one. That means building career conversation into the orientation, curriculum, and also cultural life, and not just waiting until final year to start. Because when we just normalized employability as part of what it means to study in Australia, not the bonus but expectation, we not only raise outcomes but we build trust with students, families, employers globally. That's what I'm thinking. Thank you.
Excellent. So we need to make employability front and center right from day one, and it's core to every student experience across our institutions. Great piece to put down. Ross, what would you add to that? What would be your key recommendation or insight?
Yeah, I think the main thing is to really change the mindset from career outcomes as a specific job title or directly within what you learned in university, to try and think a little bit more broadly around what are the skills that you can use that will give you agility to take on many careers. And while many students want a direct outcome that they get from one degree, for example, doing a nursing degree, you're probably going to go into that, but you might go into the army, you might go into teaching, you might go into lots of different routes. I think taking that broader view of careers as skill sets that are transferable across lots of different types of roles, that would be the number one thing that I'd love to kind of lead with.
And that nicely brings us back full circle to the economy that Alan was talking about. We measure success by employment outcomes, and yet employability, a much more longer term view. So thank you, Ross. Payman, I think that naturally leads to you. What would be your one recommendation, takeaway, or insight from the panel today?
Yeah, thank you. I think there is a phrase that just pops into my mind. It's called "meeting at the crossroads." It's coming from someone's research, but I like that phrase, and I think it's relevant here. And what I mean by meeting at the crossroads, again, going back to what I was highlighting in terms of dialogue between our domestic students, who perhaps have a different notion and conception of what is career and career development, and our diverse international students, and somehow creating a strategy so that the two can meet each other at the crossroad, rather than us jumping up and down, wanting international students to be like this and that. I guess there's potential in creating connection and synergies between our domestic students, especially those who are navigating the career landscape more successfully, to create more dialogue between the two groups, or at least a number of groups, not just two, I suppose, to have dialogue about, what is career to them, what is career development, how do they view work, employment, and so on. And again, going back to what Tony highlights, this should happen from day one. Yeah.
And Payman, a great piece of advice, I think, not just for students who are studying at our institutions, but potentially for they will eventually become part of our workforce if they're not already, and a wonderful piece of advice also for the world of work. Elaine, over to you. Keen to hear what would be your one takeaway, your one key insight?
So from the work we do in the alumni space, we see that staying connected, whether through events, mentoring, or some of the global networking events that I mentioned, can open so many doors at every stage of life. So I would highly encourage everyone to update their details and stay connected. It's really disheartening when you hear of someone that's missed out on their reunion or missed out on an event in a particular city, all because we didn't have accurate details and we weren't sure where they were. So yeah, if I had one bit of advice, it would be to encourage everyone to update their details.
Excellent. And that, again, staying connected in a lifelong way. Shelley, over to you for your final thoughts and your final insights.
Sure. Look, I'd actually just like to commend Elaine on the incredible work you're doing in the alumni space. It's certainly something that we can be much stronger at ourselves. And the importance of that lifelong learning and connection, and to Ross's point, to make sure that we are continually offering our ex-students an opportunity to enhance their skills through whether it's micro-credentials or employability skill sets or digital technologies or AI, or there's so many different evolving industry needs that we can offer our students by staying connected. So yeah, well done, Elaine and team.
Oh, thank you. It's a team effort.
And that's actually a very fitting way, perhaps, for us to draw this panel to a close. I want to thank each of the speakers just for bringing your insights and expertise to the table. I think we've been on a bit of a I was going to say quite a circuitous path today, but I think one thing that's really clear from our panel this afternoon, that there isn't a simple solution. These are really complex. We need to think about it through a cultural lens, through a data-informed lens, that we need to look at it through a relational lens and the different partnerships. And we need to also look at it through how students are perceiving their learning and a pedagogical lens, and which again nicely fits back to where Alan started us off today, which is that systems approach, and really working across all of those different facets to support employability. So with that, I think thank you again to all the panelists. Really appreciate your time, expertise, and insights. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Kaylee to wrap us up.
Thank you so much, Caroline, for facilitating this conversation. I had tons of great insights, and I can't wait to hear what our participants took away from this. So I'm going to ask everyone to jump back onto the Menti so that we can finish with a few reflections on today. So I'll just share my screen again so that you can get onto the Menti. It's the same one as before, so if you've already logged in, you should be good to go. So again, menti.com, and using the code 58789433. So we'll jump into the first question. What was a word, phrase, or theme that stuck with you during this session today? So something that you'll kind of walk away with thinking, oh yeah, like that was really something that was hammered home, or something that was new and novel that stuck out at you, or something that you just heard on the panel for the first time. So if I can get everyone to log back into the Menti, it looks like we've got a few people on there. That's great. So what was a word, phrase, or theme that stuck with you during this session? Thank you so much. Excellent. We're getting a few people in there. Keep going. Excellent. So I think connection and embedding employability certainly were key themes. So one thing I believe that Payman said was often we're bridging the gap after the curriculum occurs, and we really need to have that connection and embed employability within curriculum. So that's a really key theme here. Connection, lifelong learning, data, absolutely. I really enjoyed what Ross shared about out of all of the potential alumni on LinkedIn from Australian universities, we have about 1.1 million of them not currently in Australia. So certainly that kind of lifelong connection is really important, but having that data to know that so many students are not remaining in Australia after they do a university program in Australia be they international students or domestic students. So really preparing them for what employability looks like as a broader sense. Fantastic, thank you so much. So we've got a shifting mindset, industry connection, collaboration, building confidence, day one, a nuanced support, university level collaboration, student support, reasons for migrating, culture, communication, start from the beginning, bridging, career development, accessibility. A big one I took away was that cultural lens. So I really enjoyed Elaine's anecdote about students bringing their parents to alumni activities, and how does that tie in also with what Payman was talking about with individualism and collectivism, and how are we kind of meeting students where they are to build that confidence. So fantastic, thank you. We'll jump into the next question. What was the best thing you heard about, or a key takeaway, something you're going to walk away and maybe implement, something that was practical, or the really kind of positive shining beacon that you heard about, whether it be from our student panel, from Alan, some of the insights that Susan provided us at the beginning, including the data there. Maybe it was Phil's wonderful welcome, or our professional panel, some of the insights that Caroline provided us. Any kind of positivity, great session, woohoo! Creating a lot of pressure touch points. Yeah, absolutely. So in our student panel, we heard there's so many different opportunities and events. So how do we create those touch points? Culturally responsive practice. Excellent. Looking through multiple lenses. Thank you, student panel was excellent. International students have different needs. Absolutely. So we learned that about a quarter of the participants here are at institutions that don't have specific career development opportunities for international students. So that's really interesting. Excellent. Thank you so much for these. Fantastic. We have 2 more Menti questions, and I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen so that we can get really good feedback about the session, so we know how to improve sessions in the future. So it is anonymous, so please feel free to give us your direct feedback. This is for the Student Life Network in particular, and how we can improve on future opportunities. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, but do stay on the Menti. So the next question is, how would you rate today's session? So from strongly disagree to strongly agree. So whether the session was engaging and kept your attention, whether the session was useful and practical, and whether it was thought-provoking. So maybe it really kept your attention, but it wasn't very practical, or maybe it was super practical, but not very thought-provoking, or maybe it was all of them. For me, it was certainly all of them, but we do want to hear from you so that we know what to do next time. So thank you so much. Amazing. So we've actually got kind of an average of 4.5 out of 5 for strongly agree. So I'll share that for all of those things. So it was practical, kept everyone's attention, was engaging and thought-provoking. So thank you so much for that feedback. Wonderful. And then just a quick, any other comments or feedback? And again, it's anonymous. We won't share it widely, just kind of with the IEAA Secretariat, as well as with those of us in the network. Perfect. And while you're putting in the other comments or feedback, I'll just quickly run through a couple of slides with IEAA future information on them. So please keep popping in those other comments or feedback. So a reminder, we've got a great calendar of professional learning programs. So we've got the Student Life Forum, which is today. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got a variety of other ones, admissions compliance, scholarships, fellowships, marketing, recruitment pathways, transnational education, learning abroad, and teaching and learning. We will also have the under 18 masterclass, which is still decided on what date, but likely late in August or early September. Also a reminder, if you haven't already, today's session can count towards your IEAA fellowship points. If you haven't started your fellowship, do go on to ieaa.org.au and you can search fellowship. Perfect. And just a correction there on the Student Life Forum, we are only hosting today. It did say the 6th to the 8th, so it's just today. Great, and if you're interested in research, there is an IEAA supported research committee. So again, the information is there for you. Thank you. And this year we will be in Canberra for the annual AIEC, for the Australian International Education Conference. The theme this year is Navigating Change. We hope you'll join us. I believe the early bird registration is available, and the program will be available, I believe, in June or July. So watch this space, but do head out to the IEAA website for more information on the AIEC, and hope to see you in Canberra. And that's it for our Student Life Forum. I'll leave the Menti available, so please do feel free to give us any other comments or feedback on the session today, or any ways that we can improve future sessions, or any themes you'd like to hear from us. Thank you so much for joining the IEAA Student Life Forum today, and thank you in particular to Charlotte and Susan, who helped organize this, and to all of our wonderful speakers for volunteering their time and expertise, and to everyone who joined today. Thank you so much for your time and listening to these wonderful speakers. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.